not pre-Ghazali. But then there are some really tantalizing little clues that you find those who have no patience for sort of the details, the facts, the micro realities. What percent of the Islamic textual heritage is published? What do you think?
From the Humber's book, I think that's the books of the texts, and I think this is very poor. It's only several that has been published. So from the study of the text and transmission, I found that I don't know in the present age, but I think this is quite still preserved in the manuscript in several libraries. So I mean it's very limited.
Very, very limited. I mean, okay, but would you say at least 50% have been published?
I don't think so. I have no idea, but compare with the books of the manuscript.
Okay, do you think 20%?
Could be 20%. I don't know.
Okay, no, I mean, no one really knows the answer. I mean, I have heard different. Jonabel told me that it is his belief that it is 15%, no more than 15%. But one of the greatest scholars he's an Egyptian scholar who unfortunately lived pretty much ignored in Egypt until Germany discovered him, and then his name is Muhammad Abbas. He died recently. He studying Brockelman and Sisgin and so on, he has a marvelous study where he tells us that he does not believe that more than 5% of Islamic texts have in fact been printed. But there's even a further problem. He develops this statistical. I have to admit, I'm not smart enough to have understood it, but he tries to study what percentage of that has been published is actually in circulation, and what percentage of that which has been published by Orientalists in the 19th century, early 20th century, or published under one political initiative or another. For instance, a lot of the, especially Arab governments, whenever they intend to slaughter Islamists, before they do that, they have this habit of going on some published Islam book, and then, it's as if by publishing a few Islamic manuscripts, that makes up for, the killing of a few Islamists. So, Saddam Hussein had one initiative in the 80s where Wizarat al-Awqaf, the Ministry of Religious Affairs, published some remarkable manuscripts in Iraq. Abdul Nasser, before he executed Sayyid Qutb, had one initiative where he again, but the problem with these initiatives is that they publish the book, they print about 1,000 copies at best, they sell them to mostly Western libraries, and vanish. That's it. So people like me live in perpetual poverty. Why? Because I go around trying to find these prints and buy them, and of course, booksellers in Egypt and Syria and in Aleppo and so on, they're smart. They know that only 1,000 copies were ever published. But when you add to this the manuscripts that we really have not Dimitri Gutas, who's a professor of Islamic philosophy at Yale, started doing a very interesting study as to the number of manuscripts held by Yale University and Princeton University that are singular copies or something unique about the copy. So in other words, it could be a book that, according to records, there's a copy in Cairo, there's a copy in Turkey, but the Yale copy has some features that are unique. We don't find in the Cairo copy or so on. And he I don't know if he ever published this study. I mean, I really hope to God he did, because it's very fascinating. That indeed what he started discovering more and more is that the dispersion of Islamic manuscripts is so vast that if you think of those manuscripts held in Turkey or those held in Israel or those held in Malaysia or Indonesia or Ethiopia, or in other words, you get beyond the Dar al-Kutub in Egypt and the catalog Saudi Arabian collection and the catalog Moroccan collection, which is actually very poorly cataloged, and start thinking of you start realizing that the Islamic intellectual tradition, our grasp of it, our ability to speak authoritatively for it, is seriously hampered by the intellectual laziness of those who investigate it. And this is why I got upset at these students at Malaysia. There's a tendency, of course, a natural tendency for all of us to want to generalize, to say, we know. I mean, how useful is it after you spend 10 years, 20 years, your conclusion to your students is, you know what, I really don't know much at all. Of course, it's not very satisfying to the ego. But I have to tell you that I can share with you what I've discovered in my journey. Right? I can share with you what I suspect and what I think I know, but there is very little that I can know with certitude for the archaeological state, simply for the archaeological and anthropological state of the intellectual tradition of Islam. I'll give you just one small example. And I discovered this in Iran. Okay, we learned that the Mu'tazila they've been conquered, defeated, swept away, destroyed, blah blah blah, by the Ash'ariyya, and that basically by the time you get to the 5th century Hijrah, it's all done, right? Now, here I am in Iran, and I am abusing the hospitality of some very nice people, and by looking in there. Actually, it was an Ayatollah's private collection, Ayatollah Hussein Mudarris al-Tabatabai, and I found this text. Okay, it's written in the 7th century Hijrah. And it is an epistle, fascinating epistle. It is an epistle in which the author adopts the voice of Satan. So the author starts out the epistle by telling you, this is the hereafter, and God is bringing everyone to come forward and be held accountable. And then Satan says, okay, I will now tell you the big trick I played, and I will reveal it to Muslims. And by the way, the name of that epistle is Risalat Iblis ila Ikhwanihi al-Manahis, the epistle of Satan to his miserable brethren. And Satan says, what I have fooled Muslims by convincing them that the Mu'tazila is wrong. But what is truly fascinating about the text is that he says that my intentions were to defeat Islam. So I defeated Islam by making it by associating Islam with everything. This is written in the 7th century. Associating Islam with everything that is ugly, unethical, and irrational. And so I went and I whispered to the Ash'aris. Of course, obviously it's a rhetorical piece. So it's part of its fascination. It's debate. It's dynamic engagement with the other, right? So it says that, and I inspired the counter arguments to the Mu'tazila. And this is my biggest service, is that I have perpetuated and promoted the irrationality of the Ash'ariyya in the Islamic civilization, to convince Muslims that the Mu'tazila are not orthodox, while I all along knew that the Mu'tazila are really the orthodox people of God, and so on. But fascinatingly, though, the battle, as he describes it, as the author speaking in the voice of Satan, is inconclusive in his view, in the sense that he says, well, these Mu'tazila, they keep, I've done this, but they came back and they argued this, and then I've done this, and they came back and they did this, and they beat me in this, and then they brought back, this scholar was born who argued. So in other words, in this, according to this fascinating text, even 7th century, and the author doesn't see, it was apparently, although written in Yashapur, but thanks to Hussein Mudarrisi and his own research, it received quite wide dissemination. And quite interestingly, is because of the popularity of that epistle, the author himself ends up being assassinated. Not by the government, but by our various claims as to who assassinates him. Point is how do you place an epistle like that? Okay, how many of them are out there? How do we know when we continue to be that, for instance, in Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Syria or Jordan, you cannot publish a manuscript unless the religious Ministry of Religious Affairs and so on attests to the orthodoxy of the manuscript. Some of the most beguiling examples. Ibn Taymiyyah's fatwa, unfortunately, our friend seems to have not been able to endure very long, because he would have found this interesting. Ibn Taymiyyah's fatwa were published in 37 volumes, right? I don't know if you've ever, Ibn Taymiyyah, a very big figure in the Salafi movement and so on. Do you know that there is only one accurate print of Ibn Taymiyyah's fatwa? And that was the one that was published in 1968, Cairo. Why? Because every single print, and it's been printed numerous times since then, has been cleansed for unorthodox. Yeah, it redacted exactly. So these Saudi jurists actually sit and they read Ibn Taymiyyah and they say, no, this is not good, this is not correct Islam. But they don't even say in the printed copy that anything has been redacted. So unless you had the 68 edition and you were comparing, or you had very good memory, you would not know. So my point is that for one way that you can become popular, and this is, and one way that you make money and become a popular person and so on, is to simplify people's world. Okay? You think about, even just personal level, the most popular personalities are people who can have a good sense of humor, crack jokes, because jokes cannot be funny if they're complicated. At least, they need an essentialism to be able to produce that reaction of a laugh. If they have sophistication, it's very subtle sophistication. It's like you laugh about it at the moment, but later on you say, wait a minute, this sneaky person, but to be a person that seeks complexity, because you in my case at least, I don't see human beings as simple. I mean, I have lived with my father for over 20 years. I haven't figured out my father. I've lived with my mother, and I haven't figured out my mother. My son, who's 20 years old, I haven't figured out my son. I haven't figured out my first wife, and I haven't figured out my second wife. Maybe that means I have serious psychological problems, perhaps, but human beings are complex. And what they produce is complex. And the culture and the intellectual heritage they produce is complex. But in the version of the theology that I advocate, and here I am not an academic researcher, I am an advocate, and I will always tell you when I am being an advocate and when I am being a researcher. Complexity is very much a part of God's design. It's an affirmative. Now, I like to believe that I realize the complexity first, and then instead of saying, well, God doesn't make any sense to me because this complexity doesn't make any sense, that I made my lived reality consistent with my normative reality. It is possible that it is the other way around, as some of my critics say, that I have a normative reality and then I went out and found the evidence to back it up so that the complexity is not there. But there it is. I mean, those who want to believe that, for instance, students that I give bad grades to, they like to believe that, no, I have a normative desire for complexity, and then, hello, and then I go find it, and then you can understand their motivation for it, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I sent an email to Mr. Jans that I had to go to hospital.
Oh,
So,
please.
thank you.
So, but we will, hopefully, if you're still around by tomorrow, we'll have much more to talk about. Now, what I would like to do, and quite seriously, is I want to know in this as much about you as possible. So I know what you think you're doing here, what you think your goals are. If of course, it's not a psychological session, so don't tell me if you like your parents or not, but if it's relevant to your approach to Islamic sciences, then yes, feel free to tell me about your parents or broken heart or whatever. And what do you expect of me? What is it that? This way I will be able to also be very upfront with you about whether I can meet these expectations or not. A lot of times a class is like, marriage. It's a temporary marriage, our goals simply might not meet, or they might, hopefully. Hopefully, I through this experience, I will repeat the light and glory. I will discover even one brilliant student who can leave an effect, a print on the scholarly world. To me, that's worth everything. I've traveled to countries just in search of a student, literally. I had a trip once to Turkey just on the possibility of pursuing a good student, another time to China and the possibility of pursuing a good student. So, quite insane. But, all right, let's take a 5-minute break and then come prepared to, I want you to write your name on the board. I'm going to be taking notes on you. And feel free to tell me anything including anything, your own experience with Islam and the Islamic tradition. Okay? Okay, 5 minutes. 5 minutes means 5 minutes.
Yeah. Ja, dan...
Sorry? De toilet is echt de corner weg.
Er was eventjes...
En die vlot?
Ja. Maar dat had ik al 2 weken geleden echt gehad.
Ja.
En dat konden ze niet alles zien, dus ik moest vandaag terugkomen. Dus gewoon, je moet dan terugkomen.
Ja.
Dus ik had het drukker verwacht hier.
Ja, ik ook. Maar het was de ene na de andere die...